Wake that ass up.
Early in the morning.
The Breakfast Club.
Morning, everybody. It's DJ NV, Jess Hilarious, Charlamagne the guy. We are the Breakfast Club. We got a special guest in the building.
They call him Big Elie.
The reason I don't want to mess up your last name is Mystal.
It's Mystal rhymes with Crystal. I made that up myself.
Elie Mystal. All right.
The kids used to say Elie rhymes with jelly, and I didn't like that at all. So, I had to come up with
But
something.
welcome. New book out, Bad Law.
Man, first of all, Elie, you're one of my favorite people to listen to. I love reading your work in The Nation. I started reading a lot more of your stuff a few years ago when I realized the Constitution didn't mean much, okay,
Not to
anymore,
us.
right? So the people, I'm glad you're here. What got you into studying constitutional law?
Well, I went to law school,
Okay.
and I hated it. I went to Harvard Law School, and part of the legal training is like they say that they're going to make you think like a lawyer, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what that means is that they take the way you think, which was fine to me,
Mm-hmm.
and they break you, and then they try to build you back up in this new like legal way of understanding the world. And I just never accepted the training. I at every point when you're telling me that like, oh, well, this is how it's always been done, I'm always like, by the slavers? And I should care about that. Why? And just so it was a constant while I was in law school, like back and forth in terms of my professors trying to kind of push me in a certain box and me resisting that box. And not all of my professors. One of my professors was current Supreme Court Justice Elena Kagan. She was great, right? But I would go to her office hours and be like, why is this like this? And she would say, Thurgood Marshall once said. It's like, I don't give a damn what Thurgood said.
Yeah.
He was talking for a different time. What about our time? And so these were the conversations I had all the time. And that led to my first book and certainly my career in general.
And that's why you feel like all laws before 1965 should be deemed unconstitutional?
I said presumptively unconstitutional, which is a legal dodge. I'm trying to lawyer my way around that. But my fundamental premise is that before the 1965 Voting Rights Act, which I think is the most important piece of legislation ever passed in American history, this was functionally an apartheid country. Not everybody who lived here could vote here. Not everybody who lived here could participate in the government here. The majority of people who lived here, if you think about not just black people, but also Latinos and also women, couldn't actually participate in the government. What do you call that? We have a word for that. That word is apartheid. And so if you're now going to say that we passed some law before everybody had a say, before everybody had a vote, and that law should still be controlling today, I say, hell no, right? It's like Roy Breaker from Lock, Stock, right? If the milk's sour, I ain't the type of pussy to drink it, right? So if you're going to go all the way back before everybody had a vote, I'm saying that presumptively speaking, that law should mean nothing. Now, I'm not saying that you get rid of every single law passed before 1965. Some of them I quite like the 1964 Civil Rights Act. I think that was a good law. I also like the Sherman Antitrust Act. I like a lot of laws that were passed before 1965, but my argument is that if we like the law, we could pass it again. We could pass it again, this time asking everybody. And for that example, I didn't make that up myself, right? The example that I'm using here is what they did in South Africa, right? When South Africa got over apartheid, did they just go back to their Afrikaner racist constitution, be like, oh, we just need a couple of amendments. We just need a couple of changes here to make it work. No, they threw the whole thing out and started again, this time asking everybody.
Wow.
This time having a completely new delegation of all of the people of South Africa, not just the white folks, but not no white folks. And they came up with a new constitution. It's one of the reasons why the South African constitution is generally thought of as one of the best constitutions in the world. And ours continues to be a piece of crap.
So what laws would you kick out immediately? What laws are you saying it needs to get the fuck out of here?
Yeah, so the first one I have in my book is that I want to eliminate every single voter registration law. All of them. All of them in every state are bad, right? That's different from voter eligibility, right? We, I think, can all agree that there should be eligibility requirements, like an age requirement, right? You have to be 18 to vote.
Yep.
I might say 16, but I'm not going to say 8. Right? I got an 8-year-old. We don't want, no, they're not ready for that, right? That's a voter eligibility requirement. But once you're eligible, there's no reason for you to have to pre-register in order to execute your franchise. If you're eligible to vote, you should just be able to rock up to the polls and vote. Again, I didn't make that up. That's what they do in nearly every other democracy. And nearly every other democracy either has mandatory registration automatic registration or same-day registration. What we do with this bull crap of like having to show up 10 days before, a month before in some places in order to pre-register before you're allowed, we're alone basically in the modern world in terms of people who do that. So we could just get rid of all of them. We could just get rid of all of them. And the people will say like, oh, well, we can't do that because of voter fraud, right? Well, first of all, and I know this is going to be hard for some listeners who spend a lot of time listening to Republican lies, but voter fraud does not exist.
I loved how you broke that down in the book. Expound, please.
Right?
Yeah.
Voter fraud just doesn't exist. It's not a real thing. We shouldn't make laws based on protecting us from things that don't exist. Right? An analogy I've made is like, if let's say I want to go fishing. I want to go fishing that lake. And the government says, no, you can't fish there. And I say, why? They say, because the Loch Ness Monster might get you. Like, get out of my face with that. Shut up. That's stupid. We're not going to restrict my right to fish because of a thing that doesn't exist. So that's number one. But number two, Republicans keep saying we need voter ID. The voter ID is the thing that secures our election, that protects us from voter fraud. And I call their bluff. I'm like, all right, you want voter ID? Fine. Let's make a deal. Remember how this country used to actually make deals in order to move forward? Let's make a deal. I'll give you your voter ID. It's got to be national. It's got to be free, because if it's not free, it violates the 24th Amendment's prohibition on poll taxes. But you give me a free national, I'll give you a free national voter ID, and you give me automatic registration of every eligible voter that is also portable between either in the states or between the states. Portable means if I move, I don't have to re-register. My registration follows me. I don't have to follow my registration. You give me that deal, I will give you your ID card. Who says no? And I promise you, the people who say no are the Republicans, are the ones who claim that voter ID is necessary to secure our election, because their goal is not to secure elections, because again, voter fraud doesn't exist. Their goal is to restrict people from voting. So if I say, hey, we're going to fix your fake fraud problem, but we're going to let a lot more people have a lot easier access to voting, Republicans are the ones that are like, oh, no, that's not, yes, but not like that. Right? It's so again, if they were serious about voter ID, there is a deal on the table that we could make, and they are the ones who don't want to make it. And that goes through, as I'm sure you guys know, through so many issues in this country where Republicans claim that there's a problem, and Democrats, and I got a lot of smoke in the book for Democrats, but generally Democrats are like, okay, let's make a deal. And Republicans are like, we don't want the deal. We want the issue. Yeah. We don't want to fix it. We want people to be pissed that it isn't fixed. And that's what Republicans keep doing, as opposed to actually making a deal with Democrats, who are always willing to fold and trade and whatever. And so we don't fix anything. We just keep being pissed about things that aren't fixed.
Well, question, do you feel like all elections have been free and fair? Because people will say, Democrats will say the 2016 election was stolen. And then some will say they feel like this one was stolen.
Big picture, we haven't had a single free, fair election in this country, ever. Ever. Because we've never had an election in this country. This goes back to my point. We've never had an election in this country where everybody who was eligible to vote or should be eligible to vote could easily go and vote. So I would say it's never actually been free and fair. In terms of the particulars and the current, what was rigged, what wasn't rigged, whatever. Look, Trump lost in 2020. And he won in 2024. I don't like that he won in 2024, but he both got the most popular votes. 90 million people stayed home, but he got the most popular votes of the people who bothered to show up. And I believe the election happened as fairly as we do in this country.
What do you think about his executive orders on elections that he just recently signed?
This is all his national ID crap. Okay. And if you look at his version of national ID, think about the things that he won't do that I just said that we could do for national ID. He won't make it free. He literally is talking about IDs that people have to pay for. And while that might not be a lot of money to people like you and me, that's a lot of money to somebody. And it's a regressive tax. That means like it's a larger percentage of your funds, the less money you have, right? So first of all, he's not making it free. Second of all, he's not making it national. So he's putting in a system where like Alabama or Mississippi can have one kind of ID requirement, but Wisconsin and New York can have another kind of ID requirement. And we can imagine just how worse it'll be, how much harder it will be for certain kinds of people to get IDs in Alabama or Mississippi versus New York or California, right? So he's not making a national fix to the problem. And he's trying to give the specter that this is somehow tied to making sure that people are citizens. Non-citizens already can't vote. And there has, again, not been any evidence produced by any of these people that we have a significant or even a minor portion of non-citizens actually trying to vote. Again, it just doesn't happen, and certainly doesn't happen in the numbers that would be necessary to like flip an election, right? But he's not. Again, he's not interested in fixing the problem. He's interested in keeping people angry and pissed off about the problem.
We're talking to Elie Mystal, a new book out now, Bad Law, 10 Popular Laws That Are Ruining America. Can you talk about Chapter 3? Who gave away the skies to the airline?
Now, I just want you to know, Jess and myself were reading some of your chapter titles.
Yes.
We love them. We got to go through a lot of them. There's a couple that me and her were talking, and we were like, these would be good if we were on edibles, but go.
Do y'all like flying?
Yes.
You love flying?
I do.
You like flying? I hate flying. It is like the worst. It is always the worst day of my life.
Why?
Well, I'm fat, so I gotta squeeze myself into a small ass seat that ain't built for me. I got somebody's seat back right into my lap. I can't eat nothing.
The seatbelt extender.
Right, I gotta get the most embarrassing moment of my life every time I have to do it. Ma'am, can I have a seatbelt extender? I'm a fatty, please. And then I have to right, and then I like cry on the inside. Right, the food's expensive, the liquor sucks, the service sucks. I'm always delayed. My bags get lost. It is miserable.
Jesus,
right?
Why don't you fly cargo?
I fly as car, dude. Whenever I can. Whenever I can, I drive. Whenever I can, I drive. Wow. Right, and I know that's bad for the environment, but like if I'm doing East Coast, that's why my agent's like, if you want Elie kind of east of the Hudson, it's like one price, and if you want me to get on a plane, it's a whole different price. Right? Yesterday's price is not today's price. If I got to get on a plane. But anyway, it didn't always used to be this way. Flying used to be awesome, spacious seats, good service, kind people, and they weren't nickel and diming you at every point. And what the reason why it used to be great and now it's not is this thing called deregulation. The idea, the airline industry used to be one of the most heavily regulated industries in the country. That makes a lot of sense because we're putting metal in the sky and hoping it comes down at a survivable rate. That's crazy. So it used to be one of the most heavily regulated industries in the country with literal price fixing. Literally, the government set the maximum price that you could charge for certain routes. And I know conservatives, Republicans, even a lot of Democrats are like, price fixing, that's terrible. That stops innovation. No, it doesn't. It makes flying a public service, and it makes it easy for people to get around the country. FDR thought it was a war plan, thought it was part of our mobilization plan for war to have reliable, cheap, and accessible commercial air flight, right? Democrats and Republicans gave the skies away literally to corporate raiders in the 1970s. Now, when I started researching this book, I actually assumed that this was a Ronald Reagan program because most, I don't know about your process. My process is usually like, if I see something bad, show me the Republicans, right? Show me what Reagan did because I'm sure it's his fault. And there's always a mustache twirling Republican, behind every curtain. But for this particular issue, this Republican plan to deregulate the airlines and let the market decide how we fly as opposed to the government, that was spearheaded by the Democrats. And as I did the research, Democrats that we all know kept coming up. Joe Biden, Ted Kennedy, huge in this deregulation. Stephen Breyer, one of the Democratic appointees to the Supreme Court for a long time. There were all of these Democrats that got sucked in. Ralph Nader, right, got sucked into the gospel of deregulation. And once they did it, once the Republicans, I would say, snow job the Democrats into this thing, the first thing that happened when they gave away the airlines is the thing that has killed the Democratic Party for my entire lifetime. The Airline Deregulation Act came out in 1978. I was born in 1978. For my entire lifeline, labor got gutted. Airline jobs used to be good jobs, baggage handlers and flight attendants and pilots. Pilots used to be one of the best jobs you could get. And with market forces, with deregulation, those good jobs got slashed, right? And then you go into the Reagan era where Reagan's like, social safety net. Here's a big old hole I'm cutting in your social safety net. And people fell from good middle-class jobs straight through down to the bottom. And they've never forgiven the Democrats for it. See, that's the thing that I think the Democratic Party didn't kind of realize. When you cut labor used to vote for Democrats consistently, right? Not just black labor, white labor. This white working class laborers used to vote for Democrats. But once the market controlled everything, Democrats weren't helping them. And that's how they became, I believe it's part of the reason why they became obsessed with their cultural issues as opposed to their economic issues, because they felt like they weren't going to get ahead economically anyway, right? If you tell people like you're not going to get ahead economically, you're going to be poor, you're going to be struggling, but you're going to be better off than that black person over there.
That's right.
They're going to be like, okay, sign me up, Trump. Like that's how it happens. You tell white folks that they're going to have nothing, but they're going to have a little bit more than black folks, and white folks will sign up for it.
Yeah, the rich white man is convinced the poor white man that the liberal white man is taking all this shit and giving it to niggas.
And it's not true. It's just straight up not true. But this particular law that I write about is one of the first times where the Democratic Party played ball with the Republicans. And I say that it's one of the biggest mistakes of the Democrats for the past 50 years. And if you understand how they make that mistake, you can understand how they've made pretty much every mistake they've made since, right? Because it's the same problem. It's the same giving to the market what should be a government service. I understand that people don't like the government. I understand that people think the government is inefficient. I don't like the government. I don't like interacting with government forces. But as opposed to the market, see, people say you can vote with your wallet. Nah, the person with the biggest wallet can vote the most when you're in the market. If you're in the government, then my vote technically counts just as much as yours, right? And that's the huge difference. So when you give away government services to the market, what you are doing, Democrats, is giving away my power to affect change in my own life, right? And that's the problem. It's like the difference between sending your kids to a school and sending your kids to a factory, right? If you send them to a school, I have a vote. I have a say in how that school's run and what my kids should be taught and how they should be treated. If I send my kids to the factory, all I got to say is in their paycheck, right?
Gotcha.
And I'm using child labor because Trump wants to do that now too.
Now you got a question, right, Jess? Chapter 9?
No, it's 10.
No, okay.
Chapter 9.
Well, actually, why can't we say gay? What are we supposed to say?
So,
You know?
as I'm sure most of your listeners are aware of, I could have written the whole book just bad law in Florida. Like you could just gone through the Florida like, this is terrible, this is just racist, this is stupid, right? I focused on the Florida don't say gay law because it is so particularly oppressive and stupid. The law says that you cannot teach about gender difference, sexuality differences, transgender issues. You can't say any of those words to school children, right? And if you talk to certain kinds of conservatives, they're like, well, that's fine. Why does a third grader need to learn about gay people? Why can't they just learn about reading and writing, right? And I'm like, do y'all have third graders? Like, I got a 12-year-old and a 9-year-old, right? They talk about all this stuff. They're not in a kind of lascivious sexual way, but they're interested in how these things work, right? They see it. It's
I wondered, would they be if they weren't taught about it in schools or showing it on television?
Yeah, because they just see it in their daily lives, right? And so I use the example: if I'm a school teacher and I've got my wife and I have a picture of me and my wife on my desk at school, the kids see that it's me and my wife, that it's a man and a woman, right? If I'm a gay school teacher and I have a picture of me and my husband on the desk, they see that that's different. They see that it's a man and a man. And they might have a question about that. And in Florida, I'm not allowed to say. Why? And so people act like it's neutral, but it's not. It is what the scholars call heteronormative. It's pushing the man and the woman, that's the normal way of doing it, and the man and the man, or the woman and woman, that's just crazy and weird, when you could just say, like, oh, that's my husband. Anyway, back to math.
So what do you think about, Trump's transgender bill where it's just two genders, this and the other. What is your thoughts on that?
It's again, biologically, it's not true. There are people who are different. That's just a biological fact. We can pretend. People think that.
Is it biological or neurological?
Man, I don't know. I'm not a scientist.
Because I said neurological because you can think you're in the wrong body, but I'm not. That's not biologically the fact.
Man, I don't know.
Biologically, it's men and women.
No, I don't think that's right. I think that there are. Again,
There's something other than a man and woing?
We have aliens.
As I see now, you're pushing me into.
Don't say gay.
You're
Elie.
getting me away from the law. But
I'm just asking.
As I understand it, there are people who are born with female hormones in male bodies, right, or vice versa, and they want to express how they feel inside as opposed to how they look on the outside. But I think the larger point is not just that I don't know. The larger point is I don't care.
There you go.
There you go.
There you go.
Yeah.
It's not me. I'm the way that I am, right? I don't care how it doesn't affect me. Just somebody else being trans doesn't make me think, oh man, maybe I should be trans. I always wanted to wear nice hats. That's not how my whatever. Yeah. I tell a story in the book about in my kids' class, one of the kids in my younger kids' class came out as a boy after being a girl.
At what age?
I want to say 8.
Okay.
And the parents were just like, blah, 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 blah. How does one really? How is that? The kids were just like, yeah, whatever. It's Ramses now. It used to be Cleopatra. It's Ramses now.
But
he's
at
cool.
8, though,
And then if I'm your mom, I'm like, no, I named you fucking Corey. How are you just gonna come up and be Shakira today?
But
I wanted
isn't
to be
that?
a
But you gotta
werewolf in
think
third
about
grade.
that.
But that's between Ramses and his mom.
And the mom.
That's
okay.
not between me and that's not between the school and the kid. I don't have a say.
But it kind of does. Because
I get what you're
what does
saying.
the school call him or her? You know what I mean? Because if your mama named you Corey, and now you're saying I don't want to be called Corey, I want to be called Shamika. So now is the school supposed to call you Shamika?
I just don't think an 8-year-old should be making that decision.
Man, my kids go to a progressive school where, like, if my kid came in and said, I want to be called Ketchup today, they would call him Ketchup. They would call him what the kid wants to be called. And I think that's just the natural thing to do. If somebody comes and tells you their name, you say their name, right? You don't say, actually, you're Cassius Clay. No, you say, you want to be Muhammad Ali today. Guess what? You get to be Muhammad Ali
So if
today.
your kid goes to school and say I'm Batman, they're gonna call your kid Batman.
They're going to call my kid Batman.
But see, I think that's a little different. We're talking about
Is
his
it?
name. Yeah, because if I say, yes, this is my name, you call me my name. But if I say, I am Ketchup, and I just stand still, and when hot dogs come around, ketchup coming out my head.
It's
You know what I'm
different,
saying?
yo.
That's just a little different.
I disagree. I don't think Ramses does anything different in school now that he's Ramses than he did when he was Cleopatra. I don't think that doesn't learn differently, doesn't eat lunch in a different.
He might start going to different bathrooms.
Might start
which
going
would
to
make the
different
other women, which make women uncomfortable.
Tell the kids uncomfortable.
Yeah, the other 8-year-old girls.
All right.
They're only 8, Elie.
Do you know how uncomfortable kids are in bathrooms as they hit puberty generally?
So now you send a little boy
But
in?
yeah, but now it's
Into a
different.
private stall?
Yeah, but you gotta walk past the sinks and other dudes before you get to the private stall. And it's like, what you doing here, Shamik?
Yeah,
you know,
you have daughters or sons?
Sons.
All right, so your sons will not get naked in front of your wife and other women, but he will do it in front of you, correct? If you have to change or if it's something like that.
You're
So
the
now
dad,
imagine
yeah.
a girl going into a boy's bathroom where urinal, he's going to feel uncomfortable. It's going to make him feel awkward, don't you think?
And even more uncomfortable than he would, then, you know.
So we were at City Field, and my boy going to the urinal, and my boy just drops trow. Doesn't use the fly. Doesn't just drops trow to his ankles and just takes a pee. Now I was uncomfortable. I was like, that. How was you raised? Oh wait, that was me. Like how did that happen? Right? And I was like, maybe you should pull. When you do. He's like, oh, why? It's my butt. Why? I was peeing, and I was like.
He
All
definitely
right, son.
sounds like your son. For sure. Yes.
That's a fair point, right?
Yeah.
Like people will get over it. People will learn. And again, we're talking about this from the perspective of making things more comfortable for the heteronormative kids in the school. We also should be talking about this in terms of making things more comfortable for the trans kids in the school. Because as much as we might say it might be uncomfortable for the trans girl in the girls' bathroom for the other girls. Imagine how uncomfortable it is for the trans girl in the boys' bathroom as they hit puberty. And we know, and again, this is not me making it up, we know statistically speaking that trans women are the most likely people to be brutalized, to be murdered, to be beaten up, to be victims of domestic violence in this country. So if you're telling me that we can potentially save some trans kids from that fate, and the cost is that some girls have to be a little bit uncomfortable in a bathroom at a high school, that is a trade that I am willing to make, and that is a trade that I think society should be willing to make.
I respect everybody's right to live, but I don't want to have this conversation no more. Like you said, what you said earlier is true. I don't care.
Yeah.
That's how y'all lost the last election. Like,
it's one of your favorite people. You like to listen to him.
I do.
So
I just don't like this part.
Listen, take them all colors. This is what we like to do.
Only. I don't even.
Can I just get back to the law just really quickly?
Please.
Just very quickly on the law of this, the idea that we can discriminate against trans people but nobody else doesn't make sense legally. Right? If we're going to have a law that treats everybody equal under the law, then we have to treat trans people with the same kind of respect and decency that we treat everybody else. And once you start trying to poke holes in that, you see they're not stopping at trans. They're going right to gay. They're going right to all these other things, right? The chapter, it says, we can't
say gay. Now we can't say trans.
Now we can't say trans. Now we can't say all these other things, right? So again, from a legal standpoint, equality.
You want to drop your trousers? You going to?
No. You might as well just pee right here. Just whip your shit out and just pee right here. We're not uncomfortable at all.
That's we're evolved, right?
Yeah.
So just legally speaking, the easiest thing in the law is just to treat everybody equally.
I got you.
Why are people so nonchalantly discussing Trump getting a third term?
Well, here's the thing. He can't constitutionally, but what he can't do and what he can do are two very different things.
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
If you understand that we live in a fascist dictatorship, and we do, this is what it feels like. I know that the New York Times hasn't said today fascism started, but like it started, right? We are now living in a fascist dictatorship. And so when you tell the fascist dictator, hey, you can't do this legally, I might be right, but he might not care. So if you're asking me about the law, no, the 22nd Amendment is ironclad on this issue. There is no wiggle room. You cannot serve. You cannot be elected president more than twice. Doesn't matter if your terms were consecutive or non-consecutive. They were very clear at what they wanted to do when they wrote that amendment. It's one of the most clear amendments in the entire Constitution. That said, Trump is a fascist dictator. And if look, bro, my man lost the 2020 election and attacked the Capitol and came this close to overturning that election, right? So who's to say that he can't do it again? Who's to say that he can't be successful in doing it the next time, right? Like, so we can't blithely say that he can't do something just because he's legally prevented from doing something. He's already shown he doesn't actually give a damn about what he's legally prevented from doing. So can I make a case for how he'll do it? Sure, I can make. I like to say one of the things that makes me a little bit of a different legal commentator than a lot of others is that I understand what white people are capable of. I've never forgotten what white people are capable of in this country. And if you want to tell me that Trump is going to run for a third term and has a way to win it, I can tell you how he does it. He gets himself, because remember, we don't have one federal election system in this country. We have 50. So all he has to do is get himself on the ballot in red states that are already capitulating to him, enough red states to get to 270 votes. The ballot process is controlled by the states, not by the federal government. You can say, well, like he shouldn't be kicked off the ballot, but he should have been kicked off the ballot last time because he was in violation of the 14th Amendment. What did the Supreme Court do? Oh, no, we shouldn't decide such things. It should be up to the 14th Amendment. He should have been kicked off last time, but the Supreme Court didn't step in. Will they step in next time? I don't know.
So what Al Sharpton and everybody saying is BS that can't happen. That's untrue. It can.
No, it's not BS. It can't happen legally.
Got you.
But let's not fool ourselves to think that Trump is not willing to act illegally.
Gotcha.
Right? He can illegally get himself on the ballot. He can illegally get himself to some version of 270 votes, and he can illegally declare that he is still the president. And who's going to check him, boo?
Yeah,
like, who's going to actually stop him from doing that, right?
It won't be the Supreme Court. I love the article you wrote for The Nation called "It's Impossible to Overstate the Damage Done by the Supreme Court." Do you think the Supreme Court would back him in something like that?
I don't know.
Wow.
Not only do I not know that they would back him, if they don't, I don't know that he would follow their order.
Yeah.
There's been no evidence that Trump is going to follow a Supreme Court order that he doesn't like. And more to the point, there's been absolutely no evidence that he's going to enforce a Supreme Court order on the co-president, Elon Musk, that he doesn't like. So even if the Supreme Court stands up to him, and I'm putting that in air quotes, there's no evidence that he'll actually listen to them. Because anything that he controls the physical power of, and I think people really have to understand this in a kind of chest-thumping way. Like, if he physically controls it, because he physically controls the army, he physically controls the paramilitary, he physically controls the secret police. If he physically can control something, he doesn't have to listen to nobody. Legal, illegal doesn't actually matter to him if he has physical control. Now, if he only has control because he's got to get other people to do his bidding in the states, in the localities, that's a place where the Supreme Court can kind of step in and maybe show some spine, right? So if you think about these lawsuits that he has in New York against like Kathy Hochul, if it's a situation where like he has to force Kathy Hochul to do something and Kathy Hochul says no and the Supreme Court says no, well then I don't think Trump can't force her to do it unless he's literally willing to put boots on the GW, which he might, but then we'd have some real traffic problems in Fort Lee. But if it's something that he has complete physical control over, I see no evidence of him actually following a Supreme Court order.
What do you say to people who say, is it really a fascist dictatorship if this is what people voted for? The people will say that was democracy working.
People voted for Hitler.
Yeah.
People voted for Franco. People voted for Pinochet. Mm-hmm. Fascist dictators are always popular. That's how they get to be fascist, right? And it never has to happen to a lot of people. That's not how they stay in power. It just has to happen to enough people to make everybody else fear it could happen to them. That's how fascism has always worked. It's never been I read a book, Adam Serwer from The Atlantic made me read a book recently called They Thought They Were Free, and it's like written about Germans in the 1950s, and it kind of goes back to how all the free Germans, who we call Nazis now, didn't think they were part of a Nazi fascist regime. They thought they were just normal citizens in their country. They didn't know they were under a dictatorship in real time. Because for most people, their lives don't have to change. Yeah. Most people can keep doing whatever they were doing on November 4th, they could still do on November 6th. The election didn't change their lives because it never changes most people's lives, because then they would get pissed off. It only has to happen to a few people. It only happens to a smaller sect, especially a sect that people think are deserving of cruelty and shame and a lack of dignity. Whether it's trans people or new immigrants or whatever, people who think black people deserve to get the boot up the ass. That's who it happens to. I'm a good person. It doesn't have to happen to me. That's how fascism always works. Look, guys, we live in a country where you can get snatched up off the street for writing an article in the newspaper. And as a person who writes articles in newspapers, this is something that has really worried me and really changed and affected how I think about my job and my life. And we can say, well, it only happened to green card holders. Yeah, now, so far, how long before it happens to me? I'm an American, so I was born in Queens, right? But how long?
Really?
What part of Queens?
Flushing. I was close enough to Shea that you could hear the stadium.
What high school did you go to? I'm just curious.
Then I moved to Long Island, and I went to Friends Academy, which is like a private Quaker school in Glen Cove. Kind of as my parents made more money, we moved further and further.
That's how it works in Queens.
Out on the island. Right, so as I think about my career, when I'm doing book events now, I have security.
Yeah.
Right, which is not something I did for my first book. Right. When I write, I think about like how when I write about Musk, especially because he's the one with so much power, I write very truthfully about him, but carefully. I use all of my legal skills when I'm writing about Musk to be very careful about what I'm saying, because I know that he will sue people and he will go after people.
Is there anything that you feel like this presidency has done good at all, or is everything bad? Guess we thinking carefully now.
No, I'm trying to think carefully how to say it without cursing.
Let him fly.
Feel free to curse.
Yes.
It's okay.
Sure?
Yeah.
Not one fucking thing. because there is not one fucking thing that fascism does well. And if I give them that credit, I legitimize all of it. It's one of the reasons why I was so angry at Schumer's capitulation on the budget deal. If you say that you can work with these people here, there, and whatever, what you're fundamentally saying is that you just have a little bit of a disagreement on this, that, and the other thing. You're not actually fighting fascism. You're just playing normal bullshit partisan politics, right? From my perspective, Trump is a fascist threat to the country. Nothing he do can be okay. And I wouldn't have said that about other Republicans. I wouldn't have said that about Mitt Romney or John McCain or even W. Dick Cheney, different, but even W, right? You could find some things that you could work together with those people on because they were fundamentally Democratic presidents. I mean, Democratic with a small d, right? Presidents who believed in democracy.
Don't get gay. Oh, we can't say gay. Oh, we're in New York. We're in New York. Don't get gay. Because you said small d, and they were just thinking of small penises.
No, we weren't.
Yes, y'all were.
What's wrong with you, Jess?
I just got a couple more questions.
I said small d and I said Bush, like in the same sentence.
Oh, okay,
Just to
okay,
be
okay.
clear.
And Dick,
Yeah.
but listen, what was the significance of Cory Booker's filibuster?
It's got it. One of the things that Democrats can do, since they have no political power, is start building narratives, start building movements, and start building momentum towards change. Right? One of the reasons why I wrote my book is that I wrote this before the election, before Joe Biden's first debate. I knew we were in trouble by the time, while I was writing it. I was under no illusions. But I kept writing it, and I kept thinking that this would be a good time to release it, because from my perspective, if we lost, this book then becomes my first attempt to write Project 2029.
Ooh, I love that.
These people are out here writing Project 2025. When did they start writing that? In 2021, when they had no power. When they had no political power whatsoever, that's when they started their plans for this current MAGA revolution. So from my perspective, this is the time when we have no power that we need to actually start thinking bigger and start thinking more actively, right? When Republicans come into office, they come in with a sledgehammer and they smash things that I hold dear, smash things that I care about, right? When Democrats come into office, we come in with like super glue and tape, and we're gonna like put the face back together to make. We got to smash some things. My book is about what we can smash. What Cory was doing is that same kind of idea of building momentum to something bigger. And that is the best use of Democratic power at this point, because it's the only power that they have, right?
Well,
you can't actually stand up to them legally because you have no authority. You can't stand up to them in Congress because you have no authority. Now, I think they should be doing more than placards at the State of the Union. That was pathetic. Doing what Cory Booker did, breaking racist Strom Thurmond's record on the Senate floor. Like, these are the narratives and stories that we can be building now, so that by the time we get to 2026, I'm not even talking about 2028, by the time we get to 2026, primary season, that's the fight.
But is it too late if we're already in a fascist dictatorship?
Fascist dictatorships don't historically last very long. Okay. Because they overplay their hands. They're terrible. And they overplay their hands, and while that small group of people that they want to hurt at the outset, that everybody's like, yeah, let's hurt them, that always expands. It always expands. That's the nature of fascism. The in-group gets smaller and the out-group gets bigger, and there's a tipping point when the out-group is so big they can overthrow the in-group. That's how every fascist dictatorship has ended, except for Rome, where you needed actual barbarians.
Has there ever been, and you would know this, I don't, has there ever been a time in history when fascism has been voted out, though, is what the question I'm asking?
Yeah. Franco was voted out.
Okay.
Right? We didn't have to bomb his country, right? You can vote these people out. Again, I'm not sure that we're going to have a free and fair election anytime soon.
That's the question.
But yeah, you can vote these people. And if my wife's from Zimbabwe. If you look at the African continent, it happens all the time. You get like a terrible warlord, and they're do terrible things, and usually they have to die, but when they die of like natural causes, you have a new election, and sometimes you get much better leaders the second time around. I would hope that we're not in a situation where we're in this until this man chokes on a Big Mac. Like I would hope that we could be a little bit more proactive than that. But no, I don't. We're in a fascist period. Whether it lasts 2 years or 5 years or 10 years or 25 years is entirely up to us.
All right. Well,
Elie Mystal, his new book,
right.
Bad Law, 10 Popular Laws That Are Ruining America. I learned a lot from you, Elie. I like reading your stuff, man. You are very good at what you do.
Thank you so much.
I learned
try
a lot
to make
in
it
this
accessible.
interview. I learned a lot in this interview, so I appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you so
for
much.
having me.
All righty. Ladies and gentlemen, pick up the new book, Bad Law. It's The Breakfast Club. Good morning.
Wake that ass up.
Early in the morning.
The Breakfast Club.